Welcome everyone to an episode of Leading Wyoming, a podcast sharing the stories of Leadership Wyoming alumni from across the state. Today we're here with graduate Billie Addleman, class of 2008. And Billie, tell us a little bit about where we are and why you picked this spot.
Mandy, good morning.
Good morning.
We are in the Recreational and Athletic Complex, also known as the RAC, at Laramie County Community College, or LCCC. This is where the athletic program exists at LCCC, and it's something that I'm involved in and passionate about.
Billie, you are involved in a lot of things around the community, and tell me a little bit about where that drive sort of came from, of how you started to get involved in different nonprofits, organizations, and sort of spread those wings.
Very early, well, I had a role model. I've had several role models in my life, and one of them as a child, and when I was in law school and college, was an individual by the name of Jimmy Atheraldi. I don't come from a family of volunteerism or philanthropy, but he was a role model in a small town in rural Nevada that just did everything. He was involved with the Lions Club, the VFW. He volunteer coached for baseball. He was the announcer for the athletic teams, and he was someone that I recognized very early on was someone that contributed to the community and who I idolized for what he did for his community. And I've had role models along the way that have enabled me and supported me in giving back to our community.
Awesome. And what are some of the things you're currently involved in?
Currently, I'm on the LCCC Foundation Board. I'm also heavily involved with the athletic program, and my wife Brandy and I serve as host families for several athletes and rodeo students. And then also involved in Rotary. I currently am the president-elect for the Wyoming State Bar. And I forgot to mention, I'll be the president of the LCCC Foundation next year.
Okay. Those probably keep you busy a little bit?
I'm also the managing partner for my firm.
Oh, right. That silly little thing called being an attorney.
Yeah, and running a business, yes.
Details.
Exactly.
Well, we know from a lot of our alumni of Leadership Wyoming that much of their daytime ends up being committed to these different nonprofits, or maybe it's evenings, but you just sort of find a way to fit all the pieces together and make it work. I'm curious, I didn't prompt you on this, so this one is totally off the cuff, but hosting LCCC students, what are some of the highlights of that, or what kind of role do you play in their lives as you serve in that role?
So currently, we serve as a host family for a player on the men's basketball team who is from Bosnia.
Wow.
And so we've been his host family for 2 years now. And he doesn't actually live with us, but we support him. We have him over their house. We do things for him. And then we're also a host family for a volleyball player that's from Serbia.
Okay.
And so we've enjoyed that. We're just finishing up basketball season, and so we've enjoyed watching Mateo play his sophomore year. And last Saturday was sophomore night, and it's special for us. We stood in for his family along with other sophomores. And so he's been a part of our family. He has spent the last 2 Christmases with us. And not just Brandy and I, but our extended family have just grown so fond and attached to him and have done everything we can to support him.
Yeah, that's neat that people traveling from all across the world, these students or kids, get to have that Wyoming hospitality and generosity.
And sometimes, especially for international students that come to America, especially in a state like Wyoming, they can easily become isolated because they don't have transportation, and we don't have the best transportation system in Cheyenne.
Sure.
And so if they can be on an island in the dorms, and so it's been beneficial for both of us to be able to make that connection.
And Cheyenne may even have Uber, unlike other communities around Wyoming.
It does have Uber.
Yeah, the big city.
Yes.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you have a personal connection to Bosnia as well.
I did. In 1995-96, I served in Bosnia as part of Operation Joint Endeavor as part of the NATO forces, peacekeeping forces there.
Yeah. So was that a fun connection to that you have been to his home country or can relate to some experiences?
It was. In fact, I think it was quite a shock to him that I was able to carry on a small conversation with him. And as a roundabout way, the world being small is when last spring, we had an opportunity while we were over in Europe on vacation to actually meet with his family and spend a day with them in the historic town of Mostar, Bosnia.
Okay. Wow, that's really fantastic. The world is a small place. We say Wyoming is small, but the world can be a small place as well. Aw, that's really neat. Well, speaking of travel, you and Brandy get to do a lot of wonderful travel. So, for your own classmates and maybe for others who might know you, what are some of the highlights of the last couple of years of trips you've been on, sites you've seen, things that have been a good adventure for you?
Well, one place that is near and dear to us is, and probably one of our favorite places, is on the Adriatic coast. We've enjoyed spending time in Croatia and in Bosnia, but we've also traveled to other places in Europe and around the world. And for us, we also had an exchange student about 10 years ago that stayed with us through the Rotary Youth Exchange Program. And us and another couple, there was a total of 7 of us. It was a Leadership Wyoming classmate of ours that's near and dear to us.
Neat.
George McIlvain and his
Sure.
wife, Mary, took their 2 granddaughters, and we took our niece, Lexi, and we went to Paris and Normandy. But the ultimate goal of our trip was Sweden,
Okay.
where we attended our former exchange students' high school graduation.
Oh my
in
gosh,
Sweden.
how cool.
And Anna has been back to Cheyenne twice, and in fact is coming back this summer for Cheyenne Frontier Days.
That's so neat. Well, in that sense, you have children all over the world.
We do, and we have no children of our own,
Yeah.
but we seem to adopt a few here and there.
Yeah, here and there. It seems like you probably attend more graduations, basketball games, endeavors than some people who do have kids.
Fair.
That's really special, and that's such a neat way to see the world through the lens of people and families who you've come to care about and know.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, how neat. Okay, and Rotary World. Rotary is another passion of yours. Tell me a little bit about your involvement in Rotary or what that means to you for here in Cheyenne as well.
One of the things that when Brandy and I moved to Cheyenne, we could count on one hand the number of people that we knew in town. And I wanted to make sure that I met other people in the community, and the judge I was working for was a Rotarian. And then when I went to a private firm, one of the partners was a Rotarian, and so I went as his guest and fell in love with the club and with the organization, and have enjoyed my membership and have served as the president of the Cheyenne Rotary Club, which was one of the most enjoyable years of my professional life, running the club for a year. But what I really like about Rotary is the diversity, both internationally and locally. There are professionals and non-professionals in our club that I would not have met but for Rotary, and have become some of my closest friends, because frankly, I don't want all my friends to be just attorneys.
Right. Really?
Yes.
I won't make any attorney jokes
And I
here.
appreciate that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Rotary is really, we see a lot of overlap between Leadership Wyoming alumni and class members and all the service clubs, Rotary, Kiwanis, Lions perhaps, and I think it is a place that embodies some similar values to Leadership Wyoming of connecting with people who may view the world differently than you do and certainly have different experiences and stories to tell, and then having a regular enough routine that you build a relationship with them. You know, sharing a meal is a pretty intimate exchange to have with somebody, and you do that weekly. You build a relationship of respect and trust, hopefully.
And I think you really get to know someone breaking bread with them. And in fact, I'm on a board right now in which we've decided to further enable board members to get to know each other. That part of our board meeting is now we're going to have dinner together.
Sure.
Before we move into the business meeting. And
Wow.
we know it's going to be extra time commitment by our board members, but we think it's important, since we only meet quarterly, to actually have that opportunity to get their other board members an opportunity to meet each other and visit they might not normally have.
Sure. That's fantastic. Well, and I think in a world where so many people, and millennials are certainly guilty of this, which whether proud or ashamed to be in that class, I don't know which one, but that the millennial generation isn't as much of joiners of service clubs or community groups or different things like that. And partially the rationale they give is, social media provides that platform. We're part of a discussion group, or we have a group on Facebook, or I stay up with my friends through these other platforms. But I think there is something lost in not having that physical conversation, and especially just the nuance of sharing a meal where you'll discuss things that may not come up in just a social media post or a discussion forum type of thing.
Absolutely. And I think as a non-millennial that works with millennials, I look for ways to engage, people I work with or other volunteers in the community through both traditional and non-traditional. I think both sides have to be flexible in how you engage either your coworkers or other professionals that you're working with.
What does that look like? I'm curious. Tangibly, and in your firm, you are known for your mentorship and your ability to help coach along others, myself included, along this journey. But what does that look like in your office? How do you seek out and do that with maybe specifically the millennial generation or others that you're sort of mentoring?
So a couple things. One is I'm much better about texting than I used to be.
Interesting.
And especially in the non-business hours or over the weekend, checking in on someone. Even if so many times I think it's just that personal contact that is not a specific need or request, just that contact I think goes a long way in building a relationship with both in our office, both attorneys and non-attorneys, and frankly, in some of the nonprofit and civic things I do, it's just reaching out and talking to someone or checking in with them. I think is so important, and I think people feel appreciated and feel valued when you do that. And then also the traditional forms. You know, I often will pop into someone's office, whether it's staff or an attorney or our runner, and just to have a small conversation to check in, see how they're doing. Because while social media is great, sometimes just that one-on-one, you may be able to identify someone that needs some assistance, either professionally or personally, or just needs someone to talk to, or frankly, just appreciate someone stopping by and saying hi. And,
Sure.
And it's the same here at LCCC. You know, my wife and I have become, we feel like we've become a part of the family at LCCC, both in the athletics and on main campus. And so we're involved in a lot of things, and they do such a great job, both the teachers, the staff, the coaches, the student athletes, the students, that we try to find ways to let them know that we care and we value them.
I loved the story. So last week you were there as we gave a gift on behalf of the class of 2011 for this fundraiser they had done through Wyoming Whiskey on behalf of George McIlvaine, who loved this place very much. And I loved hearing the stories that George would just come to campus and walk around and chat with students and be part of the family. Talk a little bit about what role George played in your life as a friend and mentor as well.
So I told you a little bit about Jimmy Atheraldi, who's one of my role models. I'd say probably the two other most significant role models was one of my partners, John Metzke, and George McIlvaine. Interestingly, both have a long history at LCCC in different roles at different times. But George was just such a generous person and such a good friend. And we had the good fortune of being a friend, both in Rotary together and a neighbor.
Oh, neat. I didn't realize he was your neighbor.
He was a neighbor, and that's how I came to drink scotch.
Okay, very good.
That's all he had to offer
We
when I
should
came by.
probably be drinking scotch if we weren't, here on LCCC campus, where I think you need a permit for that.
If it wasn't 11:30 in the morning, too.
Details.
So, and it really didn't dawn on me until Thursday night when I was asked to say a few words that probably, other than the gift of friendship, the one gift I gave George was Leadership Wyoming.
Because he came after you.
He did.
Yeah.
And I remember, and I hope, I'm going to tell a story about that. I encouraged him to apply, and he immediately discounted and said, "Oh, I'm too old." And I told him that he would be a vital contributor to his class, and a lot of people would learn from him, and I think he would learn from it. And I told him the story of Bernie Barlow, one of my classmates, who was such an incredible member of our class, and who Brandy and I both just absolutely adore, and was a contributor, as someone that had more experiences than the rest of our class. And it was really special a few years later when George and I attended Challenge Institute in Thermopolis, and he had a chance to meet Bernie and visit with her. And George gave me a lot of gifts. I became more active in Rotary because of him. He was the one that invited me to join the LCCC Foundation Board, and he was the one that invited me to join the Wyoming Community Foundation Board.
Wow, that's really neat.
And him and I traveled a lot of miles, just the two of us, across Wyoming to different board meetings and events, and those are fond memories that I cherish.
Sure. If sharing a meal is an intimate act, sharing a vehicle across the state of Wyoming is like a catalyst for very personal relationships.
Drive to Cody sometime together.
Yeah, sure.
You get a lot of time to visit.
Sure. Well, and just the things that happen, whether it's a place you choose to stop or something. We have heard many stories in Leadership Wyoming of, a flat tire here or there, or a detour off to see something that one person really wanted to see. And we encourage people a lot, carpool where you can, because those are some of the most personal and meaningful experiences. And as a graduate of the program, I also recognize that's realistically the only time the homework is going to get done in the class is in the car.
I forgot about the homework.
Yeah, the homework. I know. That's the trouble of being a graduate. Bill was never technically a graduate. We've now made him an honorary alumni. But I think he maybe underestimated the amount of homework that was accomplished ahead of time. But as a graduate of the program, I recognized where that bar was. Well, that's really fantastic to share about George and his passion, and also how neat that you got to give him that gift of encouraging him to attend Leadership Wyoming.
And, one of the things I'd say is LCCC is a better place because of him and his generosity and his leadership. He was both a trustee and a member of the foundation board and a tireless worker. And I think it was very appropriate that shortly after his passing, they dedicated the McIlvaine Plaza in his honor and his wife's honor, Mary. And I thought that was a perfect setting because it is a space where students can socialize. And I like to think that George would have liked the fact that there was a space. He wouldn't have liked the fact that it was named after him. He would have preferred that someone gave a lot of money or to name it. But I think that there was no better place to honor George because of that's where students socialize, or one of the many places.
Wow. That's powerful, and is a lot of what we're teaching in our leadership curriculum right now. I know when you went through the program, it was the Chi Thought Bridge program, and we've changed it a little bit to talking about creating gracious space in the state of Wyoming, in our communities, in our workplace, in our family. And it's harder than we give it credit for often to create a space that people want to be, that people feel open to being, not only being themselves, but open to learning from the people around them, and just generally comfortable with the space that they exist in. And I only knew George a little bit, but I think he had a knack for carrying that gracious space with him and creating it in the physical presence of the other people he was around, which is wonderful. I also think from talking to you about your own firm that it is something you strive for, and you've already mentioned a few of the things that you do to help include your employees and make sure people know that they're connected to this bigger thing. Can you think of any other things you do in your law firm to create gracious space, or that are in mind for you of what that looks like?
Gratitude. That's one of the things that I've learned, the importance of gratitude and appreciation the last couple of years, and I think it's made me a better person, and I think it's made me become a better friend, and just listening. I will be the first to say that I'm not the best listener. That's something that Leadership Wyoming was one of the first things to help me identify through the program, was I needed to be a better listener and an active listener, and it's something that I continue to work on. And I think that gratitude, listening, and empathy
They don't teach that in law school?
It wasn't on the finals.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I know you shared a book with me around happiness. Remind me of the exact title.
The Happiness Advantage.
The Happiness Advantage. And one of the parts that really stood out to me was these professions in life that train us to be critical and train us to go for the edge over somebody else, whether it is as an attorney with an argument, or maybe an accountant looking for zeros that don't, or numbers that don't line up. And so that the lens through which you train yourself to see the world from a professional standpoint can have an effect on how you see the world personally, or the way you see your kids' behavior, or things that may lead to a more negative existence. So share, it was impactful for me, but share more about what resonated with you, or things you think about because of that book.
So you touched on one of the things, the practice of law covers many different areas. However, I'm a litigator, and part of litigation is confrontation and conflict. And it's tough sometimes to balance that with gratitude, appreciation, professionalism. And when I mean professionalism is treating someone else how you'd want to be treated, even if they're on the other side, even if they're diabolically opposed to your client, or it's so contentious. And that's one thing, as I've matured, I've worked to be better at, is not trying to avoid it being contentious. You know, sometimes if you're in the middle of a trial, in the middle of a deposition, tough questions need to be asked, difficult points need to be made, and sometimes people are pretty heated about it. But I think whenever you can, to be kind, you know, be appreciative, be empathetic, because while someone may be on the other side, they too are struggling or having difficulties themselves, even if you may disagree with their point of view or the position they've taken. The Sean Acor's book, The Happiness Advantage, was really a game changer for me. It was and I tell people all the time, it was the most impactful book I've ever read.
That's awesome.
And really, Mandy, what it taught me was, you know, I fell into this belief that success leads to happiness, and that's absolutely not the case. And the takeaway for me was that happy people are more successful. And I've myself have employed many of the recommendations from Sean Acor's book on how to make yourself a happier person. And they're really simple, and part of it is just gratitude, showing people that you appreciate. And it's a win-win, because what you see is...
No, it could be a selfish act sometimes. I mean, your intentions have to be towards appreciating the other person, but you get joy out of being thankful and expressing it.
And then that is even doubled when they respond to let you know how much it meant to you then that you did it.
Yeah.
And I've found that employing that in your daily life, I like to do it in the morning, because if I employ 3 or 4 steps that the author suggests, then after I do those, it's really difficult to start on a bad day.
Sure.
Now, you know, if I first come as I open an email or start working on a brief that's contentious or difficult or challenging, it's easy to shift in that negative mindset. But if you do a few steps, show some appreciation, an act of kindness, show some gratitude, it's really difficult to start the day on a bad mood.
Yeah, it's like telling someone to smile while they complain about something. You know, just psychologically, we're not cut out to have these competing moods or lenses through the world. Yesterday, my husband and I, in typical Wyoming fashion, were stranded in 2 different towns due to closed roads and trying to figure out where and how to get where we both needed to be. And we had both driven through pretty bad weather conditions in the morning, and we were sort of frustrated by where we were. And I said, well, let's just take a minute and recognize we are both where we are, and we're safe, and we're not making decisions about a wrecked vehicle or worse. And so let's start there, and we'll just make the next decision that we can. And it does change it. You take a moment and you say, wow, thank you. Like, that could have been different. You know, things could have played out differently. And so it does help you just sort of shift. Yeah. And I also like in the book that he talks about, it's not as though you have to write your opposition a thank you letter the morning of the trial. You can create this balance sheet across your life. And so you can tell your wife, Brandy, something you appreciate about her in the morning, and then go be a professional, cutthroat attorney during the day, and then take someone to dinner and say thank you. And, you know, all of it can be done with respect and professionalism, as you say, but all of those start to balance out over the course of a day to create that balance in yourself.
And I think one of the things that struck with me was the author's comment that the opposite of happiness is not unhappiness, it's apathy.
Right.
It's doing nothing. And he concedes, you're gonna be unhappy. If you're happy all the time, well, that's a mental health issue.
Right.
Right?
Sure. So, you're not viewing the world accurately.
But, you know, being generally happy helps you deal with unhappy periods of time. And it helps you, and frankly, it helps you be a better professional, it helps you be a better person, and I like to think it's helped me become a better husband, although Brandy would be the judge of that.
We'll call her.
Okay.
You mentioned apathy, and speaking of apathy, I have a quote from your Leadership Wyoming application to the class of 2008 that I will read to you for comment. I'll read two different pieces of your application
Okay.
because, unsurprisingly, it's quite thoughtful and meaningful. But one of the questions was, what do you think is a threat to Wyoming? And your answer, not quite apathy, but you wrote complacency. If we are complacent, the boom we are currently in will turn into our next bust. So that would have been in 2007. We know how that played out. What are your current thoughts on Wyoming's report card, maybe, on complacency or where we are as a state today? That's a hard question.
I'm not going to be politically correct, okay?
Okay, great. Let's just go for it.
I'm going to be blunt.
Okay.
I think we're letting each other down. I think we're avoiding making inevitable, difficult decisions. And I will be first to confess that I have no desire to run for political office. I never will. But I think those that do and take up that duty and responsibility owe us that elected them to do their job and make those tough decisions. And I'm afraid that we haven't done that. And I will tell you, I'm afraid that those tough decisions aren't going to be made until the last absolute minute, until we're absolutely in a disaster situation because of the political environment that we're in.
Mm-hmm. Well, there you have it.
There you have it. And I it's a challenge. I understand that. And we've been very fortunate for mineral resources for a long time. But I think now is the time to start making difficult decisions, and I'm looking for the leadership to make those difficult decisions.
Mm-hmm. It was really interesting being here with the class last week, and that question is on their minds of, we see the deficit, both, as many people know, in the individual family perspective of what the average family pays in taxes and the benefits they receive across the state. And then also the deficit just in the state budget of general, revenue versus appropriations, and where we are with that LISRA and rainy day fund. And Kermit Brown was presenting to the class about the legislative process and what that looks like. And one of the class members asked him the question, you're elected by your constituents to be there and to represent their interests, but you also have this call, if you will, to serve what is good for the people of Wyoming, whether they want it or not. The sort of eat your vegetables mentality of, if you only give a 3-year-old the things they want to eat, it's probably not a healthy choice for them. I'm not comparing Wyoming citizens to 3-year-olds, just to be clear. It did sound a lot like that. And his response, I thought, was fantastic, which is that what it requires to serve in the legislature is statesmanship, and men or women to have a bigger picture perspective of knowing what will best serve their constituents for the time that is now and for a time that we have yet to know or see, as many of us heard in Leadership Wyoming, and that it requires the ability to take that message back to your constituents and explain to them perhaps why you voted on something that they may not want right away, but will serve them in the long run. And that, I think the statement that Kermit used was, it will require some statesmanship to get us out of the situation we are in right now.
I agree. And I'll add to that is, I think the responsibility of an elected official is to do what's best for your constituents, not what's going to get you reelected. Mm-hmm. And I'm afraid sometimes people end up doing the latter.
Mm-hmm. And it's difficult. House of Representatives, you're elected every 2 years, and you may not even get anything done in your first 2 years in office. You may just be figuring out the lay of the land, earning the respect and rapport of your peers, and working towards that place. And the complexity is certainly present. It's not an easy situation, but that was I think your response, it was much of the consensus of the class of, we have to do something, and we have a window to do it in, but we don't seem to be moving at a pace where we'll have an action or a course set by the time the window closes.
And I'll say, I expect more of myself. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know I could have done more, and I can do more, and we'll try to do more, because it's not an easy solution.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, it's always easy to be critical of things that don't affect you or don't
Absolutely.
have an impact directly on you.
And it's easy to throw stones at legislators and
Sure.
senators and
Sure.
local elected officials when
Yeah.
you yourself are not running for that office.
Right. I had someone the other day in a climbing gym in Casper say to me, they knew I was coming down to Cheyenne. They're like, "Oh, you're going to straighten out those legislators?" Which I just always laugh at that, statement or response. And my question back was, well, what would you do? Like, what would you do? I know you're
Yeah.
not a legislator, but what would you do if you were a legislator? And interestingly, many folks who have that position, we know there's not a silver bullet. There's not something that is just going to replace, mineral revenue. And
No.
so it's a challenging position to be in, but there is some writing on some wall of where we're headed. I think it's important to pay attention to. Okay, enough on politics. The other thing that you said in your leadership Wyoming application, the question was talking about what makes a good leader, or what is leadership. And you made the comment, behind any great leader is always a great team or supporting cast. Do you still feel that's a guiding tenet of what good leadership is to you? And if so, what does that look like, or how do you build that?
I absolutely still agree with that. And I'll tell you, it goes a lot to some of the things we've already talked about. You're only as strong as the team you're with. And a leader can't do it by themselves. And you have to you need to empower those around you, whether it's coworkers or those that work for you, to be the best that they can be and do what they want to do. And so that they're as passionate about it as you are. And I think some of those principles that help you do that are gratitude, good listening, and empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And just showing people you care.
Mm-hmm. I had a conversation with another alum recently about the exchange of power, that in order to be deemed a leader, followers have to grant that power or that respect and trust, because you can have a title, but that doesn't make you a leader. And so too often we measure qualities of leadership by either a title or a project completed, when really the measure of the leader is what has the team accomplished together, or what power does that team grant to the leader. And it's a flip, but it's a powerful way of looking at the role of a leader.
And I think it's so important that a leader listen to who they're working with and being willing to continue to learn. The ongoing professional development of leaders, professionals, attorneys is so key and essential, that you have to realize that you do not know everything and you should continue to learn.
Self-awareness is something that I think maybe that's like a bell curve, that you're growing up as a kid, you get all this feedback through education, through professional development, whatever it is, about how to be better. You have some success and you start to think, oh, okay, I know who I am and I know how I show up. And that's usually about the time you start getting into trouble, because you've stopped asking people, how am I doing? What could I do better? How did my decisions affect you? And we just start saying things like, well, just do your job, or I used to have to figure it out too, so get in there and make it work. And I think it is our duty as leaders to continue to ask how we can improve and be a better leader to the people who we are leading, even if that means texting them on the weekend.
Yeah, the best attorneys I know are always running ideas by each other. They pop into your office, or they give you a call and say, hey, what do you think about this theory? Or what do you think about this argument? I mean, those that are constantly challenging themselves and wanting to learn and get feedback from others.
Yeah, it's an important reminder. Often will take a little more time, but get to a much better outcome.
The leadership Wyoming experience was just an incredibly enjoyable experience. The curriculum was beneficial and helped me at a point where I was still a young attorney. I had not made partner. I was still figuring out what my practice was going to be. I was still figuring out where I fit in the legal community. And Leadership Wyoming introduced me to an incredible collection of friends and professionals that, unfortunately, as time passes, you lose connection with most of them. But you still share that common experience, and it's still, the beauty of Wyoming is that it's small enough that you still cross paths and see each other. And the friends and places that I met and went was just incredible, and it was a great experience. I can't think of another class I'd want to do it with.
Aw, would you say the best class then?
Top 10.
Yeah, top 10. That's pretty good. We're getting to enough that's actually, saying above average at 20 years.
Yeah, pretty presumptuous to say the top, but top 10.
That's
definitely.
Great. That's awesome. Well, thank you for being with us here today, and thanks for sharing some of your time.
And thank you for coming to LCCC, and let me tell you a little bit about the college and our athletic program.
Awesome.
Well, for people that don't know this, and you can cut this out if you want, but for people that don't know this, as part of the setup process, Mandy gives you the opportunity to pick your location. And I really came down to two places: my law firm, a nice conference room in a law firm downtown, which is very exciting.
Yeah.
Or LCCC, which is something that is near and dear to my heart. And so I decided on that, and I reached out to Lisa Trimble, who is in this year's Leadership Wyoming class, and knowing my passion for LCCC and currently athletics, suggest the LCCC athletics facility. And we were going to do this in the competition gym, where we have some of our nationally ranked volleyball teams have participated or competed, and our men's and women's basketball teams as well, and not far from where our nationally ranked men's and women's soccer teams competed. Because one of the best parts of being involved with LCCC are the student athletes, meeting those students. And we've benefited from it. I talked a little bit about the host family program, but one thing I didn't elaborate on is what these diverse students, whether they're from Rapid City, the Front Range, Denver, or international students, add to the student body. Our students here have the experience of hearing from someone from South America or Asia or Europe.
Which is incredible.
And I will tell you personally, our niece and nephew who are students at LCCC, to have the opportunity to interact and become a family member with Mateo from Bosnia, with others. Our nieces, two of her best friends, one's from Italy and one's from Brazil. And to have that experience coming from Lusk, Wyoming, where she had 20 people in her class.
Yeah.
So one of the things I like to do is get more LCCC, to get the LCCC brand out in the state.
Yeah.
And so I have a couple gifts for you.
Oh,
and I hope others will give you gifts, because I was very disappointed. Yeah. Maybe set a price range, $50 to $250.
Sure.
For it's an honor to be interviewed, and I think we should pay a debt to it, or
for
pay
anyone listening. This
absolutely.
Good advice.
So I expect more from future, and those in the past. Don't be afraid to send a gift.
Sure. Yeah. Always feel you can mail a gift.
So the first thing is, because we're doing this in February, you obviously need an LCCC stocking cap, and we are the Golden Eagles.
Today, this is definitely needed too. So I've got my hat.
See, you're bolder than John F. Kennedy, who refused to put on a cowboy hat on camera.
No problem.
And then also an LCCC windbreaker.
Amazing. Billy, thank you.
So I hope when you're traveling around, you'll take opportunity of wearing Golden Eagle gear.
I love it. Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you for being with us, and we'll end with Go Eagles.
Go Eagles.
The Leading Wyoming podcast is possible thanks to the generous support of the Wyoming Dragisevich Foundation and the Wyoming Community Foundation.